While in Ajmer, Baba was again fasting and in seclusion doing his must work, but he finally agreed to spare 5 minutes for Irene Coneybear. I am happy to see you, he told her. Your spiritual connection with me stretches back for lifetimes. Soon you will not only know this, but be convinced. There is no need to tell me anything. I know you very well. I want you to go to America with Narina, Elizabeth, and Nadine. Follow Narina's advice on spiritual matters. Parentheses, since Baba had given Narina many spiritual explanations, in other affairs, you may use your own judgment. After Irene left to return to Dehradun, Baba remarked, she will do beautiful work for me in America. Nadine's year-long silence was lifted before she, Narina, and Elizabeth left Ajmer on 27 May for Bombay, where Irene Coneybear joined them at the Regal Hotel. Here they were detained by wartime restrictions for 2 weeks before sailing on 11 June, along with Kippy and Foundy. The Universal Spiritual Center in Biramangala, on which Narina and Elizabeth had worked so hard, had not come to pass. But with Baba, no effort is ever wasted. Whatever Baba focuses his attention on comes to fruition in its own time. And Baba had now instructed the women to look for property in America to establish a center there. One day, this would be the Meher Spiritual Center in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where Baba and a few of the men and women Mondali would visit. In the meantime, the three women were leaving their beloved Baba. He had said that 6 of the women would have to, quote unquote, die, and leaving Baba was like a death. But Nadine would truly die, and she never saw Baba or the Eastern women again. Later in Ajmer, Baba would tell the other women, die your death and live my life. In Ceylon, at the start of this Blue Bus tour, Baba had asked Narina which she would rather be, his sandals or his hat. Narina preferred the sandals since they go through everything with the master, over good roads and bad, and in India are considered worthy of worship. Now, before leaving Bombay, she wrote Baba, I put my head and heart at your feet and go wherever you send me, with your feet in my hands. I love you, love you, love you, love you. Nergiz Kotwal's daughters, Hilla and Naju, returned on 7 June, but the women did not see much of Baba during this time. On 15 June, Baba left to go must hunting in all kinds of places and weather, and by all kinds of conveyances, including a bullock cart, which at one point got mired in mud and had to be pushed. He returned from this trip on 19 June, and 3 days later, Germany invaded Russia. I missed a couple of sidebars. The first one
Yes.
was Elizabeth's dog Kippy also died a few months after leaving India. And the next sidebar is after Germany's invasion of Russia, however, by mid October, the fall rains had begun and the period of mud set in. The great army, moving on wheels, was slowed down and often forced to halt in the quagmire of the Russian roads. And that was from uh, the Reich, page 86. That might be the rise and fall of the Third Reich. I'm not sure.
Yes.
In
I think it
July,
is.
okay, in July as well, Baba was must hunting, and he issued a circular which stated that he would go into seclusion first at Meherabad and then at some other place. Baba had decided to leave Ajmer with the group on 16 July for Meherabad. But before they left, Chadi Baba created a commotion by losing his temper and, quote unquote, cleaning house. Taking a broom, he began knocking things about for 3 solid hours. But when Baba sat with him, he became quiet and laughed. What was this all about? Perhaps this. Hitler had boasted about Russia crashing down, referring to an internal revolution against dictator Joseph Stalin. But after losing heavily in Germany's initial surprise attack, the Russians stood their ground and by July were fighting back with surprising strength in men and equipment that Hitler never even suspected they had. Still, by 16 July, the German armies were within 200 miles of Moscow when Hitler made his greatest strategic blunder of the Eastern Campaign and turned aside. With the blue bus and the Buick following separately with their luggage, Baba and the group arrived in Ahmednagar by train at midnight on 18 July. But Baba sat in his train compartment for another 4 hours before he and the group departed for Meherabad, where Baba would go into seclusion from 1 August. Before entering the seclusion, however, one afternoon, Baba called the 3 women still on silence, Irene, Mansari, and Carmen Masi, to a tree outside his tomb. One after the other, he had them speak their first word in a year, Baba. After saying his name, they were sent away. When I spoke it, it was like hearing my voice from the 7th layer of the earth, Mansari stated. We were so used to using gestures that we continued doing it for a few days. We forgot we could talk. Irene had not found it difficult to keep silence for a year, and she asked Baba whether she could continue it, but he did not allow it. After a year of keeping silence, I did not want to give it up, as it saved so much energy. You control yourself more. You can control your thoughts more. You can hear them more clearly. When you talk, you aren't always aware of what you are thinking. One gets to know oneself better. I thought it was more difficult for those who were not allowed to read. One couldn't help but read something lying on the table or signboards in the street. The general rule against reading still applied, but since the early 1930s in Nasik, Mehera had been allowed to read certain things. The women were given copies of Meher Baba Journal, for instance, and Mehera read selective articles. But I didn't have much leisure time reading. Also, since there was no electricity on the hill, it wasn't too convenient for reading. Once, when they did have a few days of leisure while traveling, Mehera, Mani, and Meru studied Persian. They finished the first few Persian primary books, but when they had to learn grammar, they stopped. They were about to leave the place anyway, so it would not have been easy to continue their lessons. Rano had a subscription to Time magazine and received a new issue every week, even during the war. At first, Baba did not take much interest in it, but later he had her read certain articles from it. If an issue did not come, he even told her to write for a replacement. Baba himself read the newspaper in the earlier years. Later, Kitty read the paper to Baba when he asked for it. Margaret, however, was the first to read books to Baba. A friend of Margaret's in England occasionally sent her a Penguin publisher's book. It may have begun when Margaret received a P.G. Wodehouse novel, which, being humorous, she thought Baba would enjoy. She began reading it to him in the East Room at Meherabad, and the women brought their stools and listened. And the sidebar says, this practice continued until Baba dropped his body. And another sidebar says, on returning to India from the West in 1952, since Kitty was no longer with them, Rano began reading the newspaper to Baba. Back to the main text, Baba allowed Margaret to continue the readings, and slowly he became less strict about the women reading things. The friend sent Margaret more books: Edgar Wallace, Ellery Queen, and the detective stories of Sherlock Holmes, which were also read to Baba. When Margaret returned to England, she herself sent Rex Stout, John Dickson Carr, and many others. In addition, Margaret started reading poems to Mehera and giving exercise instruction to her and Mani. When the piano from Ajmer arrived, Mehera took piano lessons from Kitty for half an hour each day. She had forgotten everything and had to start over with simple, basic tunes. Kitty brought the sheet music for Blue Danube, and played it beautifully, but it was too difficult for Mehera. You must learn it, Kitty urged. Mehera said, Kitty, I can hardly play baby tunes, and you want me to play the Blue Danube? But she did learn the first page of it and played it, and another easier tune for Baba. Baba instigated certain programs on the hill, said Kitty, such as English lessons for some, and Margaret read poems to Mehera, all at Baba's orders and instigation. Nobody was allowed to carry on with their jobs after Baba said to stop. Baba wasn't interested in the results of anything that you did, but he wanted you to share something. About Mehera's piano lessons, Kitty said, she may not have wanted to do music, but if Baba wanted it, she did it. It was very difficult for Mehera to throw herself into anything during this period. Only Baba. Her concentration was only on him. She worked on nothing for herself. I should read that sidebar before it disappears completely. You have to scroll down. Good, thanks. Margaret saying this. Baba would wait until there was a crisis in the story. I guess that's when she's reading. At last, we were going to find out who done it. Everyone was excited. I would turn the page and Baba would say, time to go to bed. See volume 3 appendix B, for a list of some of the books read to Baba. Back to the main text. One thing I felt, this is Kitty writing. One thing I felt Baba was doing to every one of us was to get consciousness away from self and onto him. And whatever he was doing for us, he did 200-fold for Mehera. We could think about other things, and we did. Men, books, whatever. But for Mehera, he wanted her to think of nothing but him. I don't ever recall Baba coming up on the hill and not calling Mehera near him. Oh, sorry. I don't ever remember Baba coming up on the hill and not calling Mehera near him. It was her duty. Baba told us all, as soon as I come up the hill, you must be available. We could be finishing our work, running around, but Baba didn't expect Mehera to be doing anything once he got on the hill, unless he said to go and fetch this or that from the kitchen. Immediately, Mani or Khorshid went with her. Baba never sent just Mani or Khorshid to get it. All the things Baba gave Mehera to do while he was abroad, making brooches with his hair, nails and hair, in parentheses, we've all got them. The whole essence in doing it was to keep their attention on Baba. We saw where they had written his name over and over. It all had no value apart from the fact that it was obeying Baba and doing what he wanted. He wanted to keep them busy and not weeping. Mehera always wept a day or so after Baba left. Baba didn't want that kind of love. He wanted us to be active in our service to him. Therefore, he gave all these little things. They had to play volleyball. They had to go for a walk at 5 p.m. They had to do sundry little things. Baba still organized every hour of the day. On the hill, without Baba, the same procedure was followed. Baba planned the activities during his absence, and it was a walk or a game. Rano and I had to be present. Mehera had to participate. She had to take part in it, only to please Baba. Oh, let me read that sidebar. Mehera clarified that aside from the large photo frame, Baba did not, quote unquote, give or order Mehera to do things while he was away. Rather, Mehera and the others made these things on their own, using their ingenuity and artistic skills. Go back to the text. Mehera had, wait a sec. Rano and I had to be present. Mehera had to participate. She had to take part in it, only to please Baba. She wouldn't otherwise. She had Baba's orders to enter into games, whether Baba was absent or present. She may have preferred to remain alone, but Baba did not want this. They were to keep active, thinking only of Baba, non-action in action. And the final paragraph of Kitty's, everything was done for Baba so that there was no adding to one's sanskaras whatsoever. The one in the many, having only one object. These women did not do anything unless it was for Baba. Baba was trying to get their consciousness where he wanted it. Their every thought, word, and deed was done only for Baba with love throughout the day, probably into the night. They became one-pointed. The object, Baba, the one in the many.
Kitty concluded.
Kitty concluded with thoughts on Mehera's role. Although Baba could have chosen anybody for that work, Margaret always said that though we might have wanted to play Mehera's role, no one else but she could have done it. There wasn't one of us who could have sacrificed everything as she did. Margaret added, Baba had taken women to the spiritual heights of strict seclusion. Then he had to bring them little by little back to the material world. I noticed this right away when we first met. He was breaking down barriers between the East and West. We were the outside world at that time. He made them really like nuns. They didn't come out, etc. Then he brought them back. Mehera, on the whole, I don't think really wanted to come back. That was her life. At the beginning, it was very separate and distinct, east and west. In Nasik, during our stay, we came closer together, and the Easterners and we came closer together with the Easterners and became friends. Then Baba threw us all in a bag together at Meherabad and shook us up. Still, there were things brought out which took time to clear up, cleanliness habits, and so on. During the stay on Meherabad Hill, it wasn't as if we had Baba with us all the time. He left us alone quite frequently to work a lot of things out. All of us shut up together on the hill, but always none ever upset Mehera if they could help it. Mehera was one of us, but she was the quote unquote special one. Kitty concurred. Baba's supreme wish was that Mehera remain happy. Once, when I had justified something by saying, "But Mehera told us to do it," Baba remarked, "Do you expect me to find fault with Mehera?" If anything ever went wrong, Baba scolded Mani, but never Mehera. Mani became a scapegoat at times. Once I remember a Muslim servant who was sent away because Mehera objected to her over attentiveness to Baba. Mehera had to be kept happy for the work Baba wanted to do with her.
Do you want to stop?
Sure, take a turn, and then when you're tired, I'll resume.
I see Mahu has joined us. Would you like to pick up?
Sure, I can pick up. From where I should, before entering?
Before entering seclusion.
Okay, sure. Before entering seclusion on 1st August, Baba ordered that cabins be constructed on the four corners of the hill so that watchmen could prevent anyone from entering the property. For the seclusion, Baba stayed in Karim Baba's old bamboo cage in the maternity hospital. But a section of the cage was cut out so that he could reach through with his alphabet board to communicate. Chati Baba was the only must who stayed with him during this time, and Baba worked with him intensively. This seclusion commenced on the anniversary of Baba's previous seclusion a year earlier, and it also happened to be the day on which Baba had announced that he would speak. That was now put off for 6 months, which the men Mandali feared would give Baba's detractors an excuse to generate more bad publicity about him. Not that Baba cared. Baba ate only once a day a small amount of rice and dal prepared by Mehera. The women were ordered to meditate twice a day, and absolute silence was to be maintained around on tiptoes and tried to ensure that not even the dogs barked or the birds twittered. In 1935, When Baba was in seclusion, Walu had been nearly blinded by his gaze, and this time Baba took extraordinary precautions to prevent his features from being seen by anybody. He covered his face with a cloth whenever he had to communicate by means of alphabet board. And when the young man, Krishna Nair, came to clean his room, Baba went elsewhere until he was finished. High winds and thunderstorms had troubled the seclusion of 1935. But during this seclusion, the winds howled around the hill as never before, rattling the tin roof of the hospital and making it impossible for the watchmen to sit in their cabins. The nerve-wracking roar contributed to the extreme exhaustion Baba felt during the first week. And he sent word that Maya was thus working against him. Because of the winds, Baba moved to the dome or tomb on 7 August, instructing everyone to clear the area first and covering his face with a cloth so that no one saw him. But even in the tomb, he was disturbed when he tried to move into the cabin on the hill on 12 August. Chati Baba got there first with his things. This unusual behavior forced Baba to sleep elsewhere at night. Fed up with it all, Baba decided to move up the date for shifting to Panchgani, where he could continue his seclusion. No sooner had this decision been taken than the winds died down, but Baba remained firm in his resolve to leave. On 16 August, he came to see the women, having shaved off the beard he had been growing, and informed them between the 15th and 26th of November, there will be a breathtaking surprise concerning all of you, the world and the war. At 7 a.m. on 3rd September, Baba left Meherabad with the men and women Mandali in the blue bus, and the Buick headed south to Panchgani. 4 bungalows had been hired, 2 for the women, 1 for the men, and a separate one for Baba. They stayed in Panchgani for almost 2 months. Baba continued working with Chati Baba, but the mosque began to be where am I? Began to be ill-tempered. Having been with Baba for 2 years, he wanted to return to his home. Baba remarked, quote, "His time is up. If he asks again, I will send him, but all my plans will have to be changed." The weather had been sunny for the first week, but on 11 September, it started raining. It started raining, and the next day, Chati Baba again lost his temper. So, on 15 September, Baba sent him back to his home, accompanied by 2 of the Mandali. Chati Baba wept upon leaving, and Margaret observed, "I have never seen so much sadness in Baba's face as when Chati Baba's car drove away down the hill." Baba broke his fast on 23rd September and stopped his seclusion work 2 days later. On 30th September, he went on a mosque tour for 2 weeks, traveling some 3,000 miles with two of the men. But when he returned to Panchgani, Mani noted in her diary that Baba looked young and happy in spite of the hardships on the trip. His feet, too, were remarkably unblemished, though Baba walked miles and miles for mosque work, Mehera noted. Okay, Mehera noted. His feet remained lovely. Okay, I'm going to read it again. His feet, too, were remarkably unblemished, quote, though Baba walked miles and miles for mosque work, Mehera noted. His feet remained lovely. An ordinary man's feet would have been rough and calloused, but Baba's were smooth, as if he had never walked so many miles. Once in Panchgani, the women were seated outside on the veranda with Baba when Lizard suddenly shot down the wall. Mehera and the others hated these geckos. They screamed and scooted out of the way. Margaret, who was fond of the composing limericks, wrote this one about the incident. Meher Baba, our master, the great ego blaster, was sitting out with his gopis one day. There came down a lizard. It was just like a blizzard and frightened all the gopis away. Margaret had a dry wit, but Kitty had a hard time figuring out her jokes. Once, when Kitty and Ranu were with her, Margaret told a joke. Ranu laughed, but Kitty didn't get it. Margaret told her the joke again. I took it apart bit by bit, Margaret recalled, until I found there was nothing left inside. Finally, Kitty understood it and began laughing. Several...
Sorry, Mahu, did you read that sidebar at the top of the page?
No, I haven't been reading the sidebar. You want me to read it if you roll it up? Yeah. So the sidebar says, Baba and the women's bungalows were located near each other within one compound. The complex, formerly known as Sitarani Bungalow, is now called Cherbagh or garden. Cherbagh means garden. Okay. We read that and Kitty started laughing, yes. Several, if you want to roll it up all the way, then it'll be more consistent. That's great. Thank you. Several humorous plays were enacted for Baba in Panchgani. One was about a Marathi village. Ranu did not want to have to learn lines in Marathi, so she decided that her character had suffered a stroke, which left him with a limp and deaf and dumb. She made the stroke victim a cobbler with a grizzled beard, dhoti, turban, sandals, and a lure. Harman Masi was a butcher, and Katie, Mani, and Margaret, the butcher's son. So the sidebar says, Adi Senior was often the conduit for messages between Baba and Upasni Maharaj. He would have driven Baba and Golmai that day, but he was still in Bangalore. Later, when he found out that Baba had been to meet Maharaj in his absence, Adi actually wept. He felt bitterly disappointed not to have been present to accompany Baba and witness the meeting. Yeah. Katie pinned out her lines on the cupboard in case she forgot them, and then did forget them while she was on the other side of the stage. Baba snapped his fingers and pointed, "Go over near the cupboard so you can read your lines." Baba never missed a thing. Although Ranu had used a clever ploy to avoid learning the Marathi lines, Baba enjoyed her cobbler character so much that over the years he often requested that she do it again. Ranu had to screw up her face and limp around the room. The monsoon revived with chilly and drizzling days. They sometimes managed to go for a walk between showers, but once they did not wait for the rain to stop. Rain or no rain, Baba wanted a stroll. So they dressed in macintoshes and carrying umbrellas following Baba through the downpour. Baba left Panchgani on 17 October for an extraordinary contact, not with a must, but with a perfect master. For the first time in 19 years, Meher Baba met one of his masters, Upasni Maharaj. The meeting was held in a small thatched hut surrounded by a garden in Dahigan, 40 miles from Meherabad. Sarosh drove Maharaj from Sakori, and when he alighted from the car, Baba was already waiting at the hut. Gulmai and the other Mandali remained outside the walls of the garden, while the two masters met in private for half an hour. Baba had brought, for half an hour. Just a little bit up, I was reading. That's good. Baba had brought a box of lockets with his photo on them, which he presented to Maharaj. It would be their final meeting, and Padri took photos of the momentous occasions. And the side note is, perhaps Meher Baba's meeting with Upasni Maharaj was the breathtaking surprise Baba had spoken of to the women. Due to the pressure of the world events, it is possible that the meeting was held a month earlier than anticipated, rather than on the predicted date of 15 to 26 of November 1941. It had also been decided, on the way back to Panchgani, Baba was in a happy mood, and in reference to the meeting, said that Maharaj had told him that the work and powers of the five perfect masters were now all focused in him. Maharaj had folded his hands in reverence, saying, "I leave everything to you." It had also been decided that Baba would speak unannounced. Quote, "It will be when," up please. No, a little bit more, please. Perfect masters, yes. Upasni said, "I leave everything to you." It had also been decided that Baba would, quote unquote, speak unannounced. It will be when all the world has gone to the dogs. You won't even know a day or an hour ahead. In the future, there will be infinite suffering for me physically, too, Baba said. Later in Panchgani, he confined it to Vishnu. "I can bring down the stars. I now have full powers. Maharaj has handed over his side of things to me." Just 2 months later, Upasni Maharaj dropped his body. On 20th October, revealed, quote, "There will be floods and diseases. Many will go mad. There will be such suffering, and then all the kachha or dirt will come to India and explode. Then unannounced, I will speak."
There's a picture of Baba and Mehera in Taragar, Ajmer.
1939.
Right. I can take over.
Sure, that'd be great.
In the fall of 1941, Meher Baba indicated that it was necessary for his work that he cross the ocean. After his meeting with Upasni Maharaj, this cable was sent to Elizabeth in America, to whom Margaret had been writing. Momentous spiritual decisions necessitate my speaking any day now. Between February 15th and February 15th, between February 15th, 1942 and 15 February 1943. Also, the crossing of the ocean in the middle of December, latest, 1941, latest. Funds insufficient, must cancel America. Therefore, prefer going to Honolulu, Philippines, or any other places incurring less expensive fare. Baba had since indicated he would speak when the war ended. The war was now projected through February 1943, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor On December 7th, 1941. Margaret realized the hidden significance of that telegram. On October 28th, the group left Panchgani for Karwar on the west coast of India, stopping overnight in the Darwar Dak bungalow and reaching Karwar the next day. The men and women Mandali were always kept strictly separate. And a letter from Nilu to Adi Sr. refers to this. We left Panchgani on 28th in the noon by our old bus. This time, Baba and the Invisibles were in the bus, and Tukaram was driving. When they had been in Karwar previously in April 1940, they stayed at the Grand Hotel. The Westerners had swum in the ocean, and Baba made sand castles on the beach. This time, they stayed for a week in a house facing the sea. It was on this quiet main road with no buses, cars, or people, Mehera recalled, and quite quiet and lovely. We could see the sea from our house. There was a large bay. We watched the fishing boats brought in huge quantities of fishes. Vishnu's cousin, Sushila and Indu, had been called with them the last time in Karwar to help with the cooking. Baba called them again. They stayed in a separate bungalow, along with Indu's husband, her 3 children, and Nilu, because there was plenty of fresh seafood available in the local market. Baba permitted Sushila and Indu to cook it. He told them that it was the first time that he had allowed the women Mandali to eat fish in India. Our bungalow was a furlong, 220 yards away. Exactly at 4 o'clock, we had to send the food to the women. A servant took it, but we went along to see everything was all right. We didn't send their lunch, which they prepared themselves. Afterwards, Baba sat on the veranda with Mehera and told us to sing something. In the afternoon, Baba was in seclusion for a few hours in his room, doing inner work without any special musk companion. In the evenings, he went for a walk with the women. While in Karwar, Mehera even learned to swim. This happened soon after they arrived. Baba took them for a walk to the nearby seashore, which was shallow, full of inlets and private beaches. To get to the seashore, we had to walk for a mile and a half a mile on the main road, and to cut through the shady pine forest to the sea. The pine forest trees were tall and with pine cones. The best thing was that there were no people on the road. When you came out of the pine forest, there was a lovely beach. It was a nice atmosphere. We reached the beach about 9 or 10 a.m. The beach was on a big bay with gentle waves, not too strong. Baba told us he was going for a walk. We should also walk or look for shells. It was very private, with hardly anybody about. There were only a few elderly people sitting on the sand. Carmen Masi and Banu Masi Karawala sat down. Baba had a nice quick walk. Then he snapped his fingers loudly. All gathered and began walking back with him. Before they emerged from the pine forest, Mani and Katie, who were bringing up the rear, began whispering and giggling about something. Baba turned around and asked why they were laughing. Baba, the sea and the beach are so lovely and quiet. We would like to learn to swim. Could we, Baba? Swimming? Baba asked. Yes, we don't know how to swim. Since we are staying near the sea. The Westerners are here with us. They can teach us. Baba thought about it for a second and then turned to Mehera and said, if Mehera says yes and learns to swim, you can all learn to swim. I had never thought about learning to swim, Mehera said, but Mani and Katie said, say yes, Mehera, say yes. Baba, Mehera was hesitant, however, answered, I don't care about learning to swim. Baba did not order her to learn. He said merely, if you learn to swim, others can learn too. Baron did not relish the idea of getting wet and of being cold, not to mention the problem of what to wear. She was also afraid to go into the water. I was caught in the middle of a trap, she said. I didn't care at all to learn to swim, but the others wanted to and pressured me and coaxed me. Reluctantly, she agreed, saying, all right, Baba, but wondering, let's see how Baba manages this thing. Thinking of what they would wear, how they would learn, and so on. Others were jumping for joy. When they got home, they were so excited. They immediately told Margaret of the plan. The first thing you must do is decide what you will wear. I'm sorry. I know that was rough. Who else would like to share? I think we are going to stop because it's 3:02.
So top of 171. I'll make a note of it.
you
And I just stopped